Picture this: thousands of trucks dumping rotting seaweed into one of Earth's most lifeless places. 500,000 tons of kelp, enough to fill 200 Olympic swimming pools, buried in sand where nothing has grown for 10,000 years. Scientists called it agricultural suicide. Farmers laughed. But 3 years later, satellite images revealed something nobody expected: green patches spreading across the desert like a living carpet. Did China just crack the code to feeding 1.4 billion people forever? Keep watching, because what happened next changed everything. Did you know China has 20% of the world's population, but only 7% of its farmable land? That's 1.4 billion mouths to feed with barely enough soil to grow food for half of them. And every single year, the situation gets worse. The Gobi Desert is expanding at a terrifying rate, swallowing 3,600 square kilometers of farmland annually. That's like losing an entire mid-sized city worth of crops every 12 months. To put that in perspective, imagine the entire city of Los Angeles disappearing under sand every single year. The desert is literally marching toward Beijing, advancing 10,000 square kilometers every decade. Dust storms from the Gobi now reach Korea, Japan, and have even been detected as far away as California. In 2021, a massive sand apocalypse shut down Beijing for 3 days. The sky turned orange. Flights were canceled. People wore masks not for viruses, but for sand. That event became a turning point. Food security was officially classified as a national security priority. But that's not the only problem. Underground water tables are collapsing. Soil salinity is increasing so fast that crops wither before they can be harvested. By 2050, experts project China will face a 130 million ton grain shortfall. That's enough missing food to starve a country the size of Japan. Internal government reports suggest leaders fear food shortages could trigger social unrest. History has taught harsh lessons. Famines have toppled Chinese dynasties before. For decades, China tried everything. They planted 66 billion trees since 1978 as part of the Great Green Wall Project. The survival rate in desert regions? Under 15%. Most trees died within years, their roots unable to find water in the alkaline soil. They tried drip irrigation systems, but the infrastructure costs were astronomical and depleted underground aquifers faster than nature could replenish them. They experimented with plastic sheeting agriculture, only to discover toxic microplastic contamination in 80% of the farmland near the Gobi. They even tried physically trucking good soil into the desert in Inner Mongolia. The cost? $50,000 per hectare. Completely impossible to scale. Every solution was either too slow, too expensive, or created new environmental disasters. China needed something radical, something nobody had ever tried before. Enter Minqin County in Gansu Province, a place locals call China's last line of defense against desertification. This narrow strip of land is the throat where the Gobi Desert threatens to split the entire country in two. If Minqin falls, the desert connects, and millions more acres of farmland vanish forever. The pressure to find a solution had never been higher. In 2021, Chinese agricultural scientists proposed something that sounded completely insane. Bury massive quantities of seaweed in the desert and see what happens. The project was codenamed Ocean Desert, and its vision was audacious beyond belief. Transform 10,000 square kilometers of dead wasteland into productive cropland within 15 years. If successful, they would then replicate the approach across 1.3 million square kilometers of Chinese desert. Why seaweed? Because kelp and sargassum contain something called alginic acid, a natural compound that binds sand particles together. Even more importantly, seaweed contains over 60 trace minerals that have been completely depleted from desert soil over millennia. The theory was simple, but unproven at scale. Decomposing seaweed would release nutrients upward while creating a moisture-retaining gel layer underground. The chemistry made sense on paper. Nobody knew if it would work at scale. Professor Chen Xiangrong, a 63-year-old soil scientist from Lanzhou University, who had spent 30 years studying desertification, became the unlikely champion of this experiment. He had watched the desert consume his hometown village as a child. His colleagues thought he had lost his mind. International scientists called the project a waste of resources. But Chen had seen something in his laboratory experiments that gave him hope. Desert sand mixed with decomposed seaweed could retain water 400% longer than untreated sand. He bet his entire career on that finding. The plan was breathtaking in scale. Phase 1 involved harvesting 500,000 tons of kelp and sargassum from Yellow Sea aquaculture farms. This seaweed would be mixed with agricultural waste, animal manure, and proprietary bacterial cultures designed to accelerate decomposition in extreme conditions. The mixture would then be buried 40 to 60 centimeters deep in trenches spanning 1,000 square kilometers. Phase 2 would bring treated wastewater from distant cities through solar-powered pumping stations. Salt-tolerant crop seeds including quinoa, barley, and sea asparagus would be planted directly above the buried seaweed layer. The numbers were staggering: 12,000 workers, 3,400 excavators, 890 kilometers of irrigation channels. In the first year alone, more earth was moved than during the construction of the Three Gorges Dam. 50,000 underground sensors connected to artificial intelligence management system would monitor soil temperature, moisture, and nutrient levels around the clock. This was agricultural engineering on a scale the world had never witnessed. Building the infrastructure to support this massive experiment was an engineering challenge unlike anything China had attempted before. The seaweed transportation network alone required 2,100 kilometers of dedicated rail line from coastal processing facilities to the Gobi site, making it the largest organic material transport operation in human history. Specialized refrigerated cars kept the seaweed at optimal temperatures during the 3-day journey inland. 14 specialized processing centers were constructed along the route, each capable of washing, chopping, and fermenting 100 tons of seaweed daily. The fermentation process was critical because raw seaweed decomposes too slowly in desert conditions. Scientists developed bacterial cultures that could survive the Gobi's extreme temperature swings from -30 degrees Celsius in winter to 45 degrees Celsius in summer. This took 3 years of laboratory testing before deployment. Each bacterial strain was optimized for specific soil conditions and burial depths. The water infrastructure was equally impressive. A 340-kilometer pipeline was built from a Yellow River diversion project, supplemented by 12 desalination plants along the route and 45 wastewater treatment facilities repurposed specifically for agricultural output. Every drop of water entering the project site was precisely measured and tracked. The pipeline system could deliver up to 7 million cubic meters of water daily, enough to fill nearly 3,000 Olympic swimming pools. To power this massive operation, engineers constructed a 2.4 gigawatt solar farm adjacent to the project site, covering 28 square kilometers. That's enough electricity to power nearly 2 million homes. The solar installation alone employed 8,000 workers during construction and created 1,500 permanent maintenance positions. Backup connections to the state grid ensured operations would continue even during extended cloudy periods. But perhaps the most impressive feat was the worker city built from nothing in the middle of the desert. 15,000 workers needed housing, hospitals, schools, and entertainment facilities. Within 18 months, a fully functional town rose from the sand, complete with air-conditioned dormitories, a 24-hour medical clinic, and even a cinema. Workers called it Seaweed City, and many brought their families to live there. The challenges seemed endless. Seaweed decomposition produces methane, a greenhouse gas 23 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Engineers had to develop innovative venting systems that captured the methane and converted it to energy, turning a potential problem into a power source. Sand migration threatened to bury infrastructure within weeks, requiring 200 kilometers of windbreak walls to protect the project site. Water rights disputes with downstream provinces caused an 8-month delay that nearly derailed the entire program. Political negotiations at the highest levels finally resolved the standoff. The official budget was 89 billion yuan, roughly $12.3 billion. But insiders suggest actual spending exceeded $20 billion when hidden military logistics support is included. This makes Ocean Desert one of the most expensive agricultural experiments in human history. Some critics called it a gamble. Supporters called it an investment in survival. Professor Chen worked 18-hour days during the critical first year, personally inspecting burial sites and adjusting bacterial cultures based on real-time sensor data. His team of soil scientists lived in temporary quarters on site, eating the same meals as construction workers and sleeping in shifts to maintain continuous monitoring. Chen lost 15 pounds during those months, but never complained. By the end of 2021, the burial phase was complete. 500,000 tons of processed seaweed lay beneath 1,000 square kilometers of Gobi Desert. Now came the waiting. Nobody knew what would happen next. The first signs appeared within 6 months. Sensor data showed soil moisture levels increasing in areas where seaweed had been buried deepest. The alginic acid was working exactly as Chen had predicted, creating underground gel pockets that trapped water instead of letting it drain away into the sand. Data streams flowing to the AI system showed patterns nobody had expected. The moisture was spreading horizontally, creating interconnected underground reservoirs. By month 9, something remarkable happened. Bacterial activity readings spiked across the entire project zone. The decomposition process had reached critical mass, releasing nutrients into the soil at rates exceeding laboratory predictions by 40%. Workers reported that the sand felt different underfoot, less powdery, more cohesive. When they dug test pits, they found dark layers of transformed soil, where golden sand had been just months before. Then came spring 2022. The first salt-tolerant quinoa seeds were planted in a 200 square kilometer test zone. Agricultural experts gave the crop a 30% chance of survival. Weather forecasters predicted an unusually dry season. The odds seemed stacked against success. They were wrong. Within 8 weeks, green shoots pushed through the treated soil. Workers who had been skeptical began taking photographs to send to their families. Satellite imagery showed patches of vegetation appearing across the desert, like stars emerging at twilight. International observers who had dismissed the project as propaganda requested site visits. What they saw left them speechless. Professor Chen walked through the first field of quinoa with tears in his eyes. He knelt down and touched the green leaves, feeling something growing in soil he had studied for 3 decades. His village had disappeared under sand when he was 12 years old. Now he was growing crops in the same desert that had taken everything from his family. By harvest time, the quinoa yields reached 2.1 tons per hectare. This was below the 3.5-ton target, but it was 2.1 tons more than anyone had grown in the Gobi Desert in 10,000 years. The impossible had become possible. Agricultural journals that had refused to publish Chen's early papers now requested exclusive interviews. Professor Chen's laboratory tests had proven correct, at a scale nobody imagined achievable. The seaweed layer was functioning exactly as designed, nutrients rising to feed the crops above, while alginic acid maintained soil structure and moisture retention below. The desert was being transformed from the inside out. Year 2 brought expansion. An additional 340 square kilometers showed sustained crop growth. Barley joined quinoa in the rotation, with sea asparagus planted in the most saline areas. The AI monitoring system identified optimal irrigation patterns that reduced water usage by 37% compared to initial projections. By year 3, satellite analysis confirmed the headline number that stunned the world. 1,000 square kilometers of the Gobi Desert now supported active vegetation. Green coverage had spread beyond the original treatment zones as improved soil conditions created microclimates favorable for plant growth. The desert was retreating. The implications of China's success extended far beyond agriculture. If the current trajectory continues, 1,000 square kilometers could produce 2.1 million tons of grain annually, enough to feed 6 million people. Economic projections suggest the project could generate 340 billion yuan in agricultural output over 30 years, potentially transforming Gansu from one of China's poorest provinces into an agricultural powerhouse. Employment numbers tell an equally compelling story. 180,000 permanent agricultural jobs are projected once the project reaches full capacity, plus another 40,000 positions in processing and logistics. For rural communities that have experienced decades of population decline, as young people fled to cities, this represents a complete reversal of fortune. Villages that were being abandoned are now seeing new construction. Schools that had closed are reopening. Hospitals are being built where none existed before. Wang Xiaoming, a 34-year-old farmer who had left his village for factory work in Shenzhen, returned home when he heard about the project. Now, he manages 200 hectares of quinoa fields and employs 12 people from his home village. Stories like his are multiplying across the region. The environmental benefits are substantial. Seaweed burial sequesters an estimated 3.2 million tons of carbon dioxide, with growing crops capturing an additional 800,000 tons annually. Beijing has reported 34% fewer severe dust storms since the project began, as the new vegetation stabilizes soil that once blew across northern China and beyond. City residents say they can see blue sky more often. Perhaps most remarkably, local rainfall has increased by an estimated 12% as the vegetation creates its own microclimate. Underground aquifers that had been depleting for decades are showing signs of recharge. The desert isn't just being held back, it's beginning to retreat. Weather patterns are shifting in ways scientists are still studying. Tourism has become an unexpected bonus. The Desert Miracle attracts over 2 million visitors annually to observation platforms where they can witness the transformation firsthand. Ecotourism revenue already exceeds $200 million, with projections suggesting this could triple as more areas turn green. Chinese companies have begun selling desert transformation technology packages to other nations facing similar challenges. Saudi Arabia signed a $3.2 billion technology transfer agreement. Pakistan announced a joint venture for Thar desert transformation. Egypt, Kazakhstan, and the United Arab Emirates have all sent delegations to study the project. The technology is going global. The international response to China's achievement has been mixed but increasingly positive. Countries with vast desert territories see the Ocean Desert Project as a potential blueprint for their own transformations. Kazakhstan has become the most enthusiastic part, approving a 5,000 square kilometer pilot program based on Chinese technology. Their delegation spent 3 months studying every aspect of the project. Saudi Arabia's interest is particularly significant, given that nation's nearly unlimited financial resources and desperate need for agricultural self-sufficiency. The $3.2 billion technology transfer agreement includes Chinese expertise in seaweed processing, bacterial culture development, and irrigation management. Engineers from both countries are already collaborating on a pilot project in the Empty Quarter. If successful, Saudi Arabia could transform its economy beyond oil. The African Union has expressed strong interest in adapting the technology for Sahel region desertification, which threatens the livelihoods of over 100 million people. The World Bank is considering funding for African replication projects, recognizing that successful desert transformation could reshape global food security. Preliminary studies are underway in Niger and Chad. Environmental scientists are carefully monitoring the project's broader effects. So far, the results have exceeded expectations. Water quality in monitoring wells remains within acceptable parameters. The bacterial cultures appear to be staying within the treatment zones, rather than spreading uncontrollably. Methane capture systems are operating at 92% efficiency. Some marine biologists initially warned that kelp harvesting at this scale could disrupt coastal ecosystems. In response, China expanded its seaweed aquaculture operations rather than depleting wild stocks. New kelp farms now produce more seaweed than the project requires, creating additional jobs in coastal communities. What cannot be debated is the scale of the achievement. China has demonstrated that desert transformation is technically possible at a meaningful scale. The question facing the world now is whether this technology can be responsibly replicated elsewhere. Professor Chen believes it can. He has begun training international delegations in the techniques his team developed. If fully scaled across China's 1.3 million square kilometers of desert, the approach could theoretically add agricultural land equivalent to the entire country of France. That possibility alone has reshaped conversations about global food production limits. The deserts that have defeated human ambition for millennia might finally be conquered. In 2030, the world will know the full story of whether those 500,000 tons of rotting seaweed transformed China's future. Professor Chen still visits the project site monthly, walking through fields of quinoa that grow where nothing survived for 10 millennia. He is training a new generation of scientists to carry his work forward. The Gobi Desert has buried civilizations before. Ancient Silk Road cities lie beneath its sand, monuments to ambitions that nature eventually swallowed. But for the first time in recorded history, the desert is losing ground. Green patches spread where satellites once recorded only endless brown. Farmers harvest crops where their grandparents saw only death. What's remarkable is that what China is doing doesn't stop at its borders. Imagine the Sahara, the Arabian Peninsula, the Atacama, Australia's outback, all transformed using similar methods. If nations work together, desert transformation technology could become humanity's answer to feeding 10 billion people on a warming planet. So what do you think? Is this the agricultural miracle the world has been waiting for? Could buried seaweed transform deserts near you someday? Drop your prediction in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss more incredible stories about how humans are using technology and engineering to reshape our planet.